We're sorry for the delay traveling, so it's mostly my fault. Also, being a woman, it's my fault, so I take responsibility. I want to introduce my host, as y'all know, Marcel.
How's it going, everybody? Well, I know what I was going to say, but it's a new episode of Darkside Politics. Just sitting here, spreading the liberal gospel and trying to indoctrinate the children into socialist, communist, Marxist, critical race theory.
We laugh now, but I think that's going to become a political party or political affiliation at some point in the future. At least
they're called the Republican Party.
Yeah. Our first story for the day is going to be how the U.S. East Coast is blanketed in a veil of smoke from the Canadian wildfires, and the story kind of it really irks me because every time we have even more extreme weather every year, they're always like, oh my God, completely unpredicted. Nobody would have thought this would have happened. But I'm like, climate scientists have been going on about climate change and more chaotic weather for literally over 40 years. So what is there to be surprised about? Republicans always say, oh yeah, it's just the weather changing. I'm like, yes, the weather's supposed to be changing, but it doesn't just change as to the extremes it has been. There's a margin of error in both sides, but even then, it's actually it really bothers the fuck out of me, to put it plainly.
Yeah. Yeah, and also, we're seeing I know you've seen the pictures, but it's pretty dangerous to just be outside and breathing the air in a lot of the East Coast right now. I don't know how it is in North Carolina, Florida, the air's kind of shit regardless. But when it's getting to the point where, you're regularly going to have problems breathing, I think we're in a dangerous situation, not to mention the long-term impact of this kind of event. All you're going to start seeing increases in child respiratory illnesses, asthma, all kinds of stuff. I'm pretty sure there's already been.
We're already seeing that is the thing. And what's I saw this meme that was we're really going to be the time that historians refer to as a global pandemic, and then the collapse of the ecosystem. And they recommended the people in New York wear the KN95s from COVID to protect them. Mm-hmm. I just think I feel like it should go on the subreddit boring dystopia or something like that. You know what I'm talking about?
Right. Yeah, no, I'm familiar with it. Yeah, and I think this is also a problem when you have one political party that just absolutely denies that there's anything wrong with the way things are running, because we're the scientists have said, hey, by this date, if we don't do this, this will be irreversible. By this date, if we don't do this, this will be irreversible. We've already passed a couple of those irreversible points as it is. And, now we're starting to see the consequences of our inaction and the fact that, money rules all. And, as long as the green keeps flowing, there's nothing wrong with it. And to be honest, the people who cause these kind of who are responsible for the decisions that cause this kind of environmental damage, they're not going to be the ones that have to live with this. It's going to be people like us, people like you, our children, their children, the rest of them, they're going to move to fucking wherever or start some libertarian quote unquote paradise in the middle of the ocean to try to avoid these the consequences.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely terrifying. And I don't know, it's just a scary time to be alive, and it's just it bothers the fuck out of me. And I'm concerned for the well-being of our future.
Yeah.
Because humans will survive, but like it's usually going to be the people at the very bottom who had nothing to do with all these effects are probably going to be the ones that suffer.
Yeah, I mean, we're already seeing that a lot in, kind of getting a little bit off topic, but, we see this in Florida already, with the insurance companies not, well, homeowners becoming, people being unable to afford their homeowners insurance plus insurers pulling out of not just Florida, but California as well. This impacts regular, everyday working class Americans. It doesn't impact, the Bezos, the Musk, the CEOs of companies like Exxon. I know ExxonMobil is one company now, but you know what I'm saying? Like they're not affected by the consequences of their actions. And until I'm afraid, I kind of feel like until that happens, until they actually start feeling the consequences of their actions, or enough politicians pull their heads out their asses and say, like, realize that this is ridiculous. Like, this is the new normal.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, it's the world we live in, I guess. On worse note, I don't even know if it's worse. I don't even know what to think of this or make of this, but do you know that China built or is going to build a spy base about 400 miles from Florida, and it's I think they paid like $7 billion to have it built, or they paid Cuba $7 billion, which is it's kind of funny, but also I feel like this will become more important in the future.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much we can do about it besides just do what we always do, which is just, sanction companies, sanction businesses or people or whatever. But that doesn't tend to actually stop anything because, well, you're just kind of driving them further and further to that extreme they're already headed down. And, if we had a actual friendly relationship with Cuba, which Obama tried to kind of jumpstart, fuck that up, and I don't think Biden has really kind of paid any attention to Cuba. But if we had a friendly relationship with our neighbors, and had done some work to, I guess, pardon our sins that we've committed on Central and South America, maybe Cuba be less willing to listen to or not appeal. There's a word I'm looking for. I guess appease China, whatever word you want to use. Yeah, like yeah, they'd be less willing to work with China. And I guess this is the consequences of decades worth of American foreign policy, is that one of our geographically closest neighbors is conspiring with who some would call our greatest geopolitical enemy or threat, rather.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly it. It's China. I think that's how he does it. I feel like you do a better Trump China than me, but that's exactly it. Is like our neighbors don't want to be our neighbors anymore, and they're inviting our enemies or just our geopolitical enemies. I don't know if once again, I'm not calling China the enemy, but that's how it's seen by some people. Our biggest competitor, how about that? One of our biggest competitors in the global world. And they are moving closer and closer to the front door. And so it's just kind of scary to see this happen, and then also see what's going to happen with Taiwan, and what does this mean if a fight was to break out on that side of the world. But that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to understand what's kind of going on in the Chinese government when it comes to Taiwan. With Cuba, I think that this is a continuation of Chinese foreign policy, basically going where there just hasn't been the same level of outreach as there has been to European countries. It's kind of old news about China's investment, if you want to call it that. I just call it exploitation because it really is exploitation, but of Africa, or multiple countries in Africa. But they are doing things in Africa that the Western countries aren't doing, such as building infrastructure. And granted, that infrastructure is the benefit of the Chinese, not the people there. But hey, you didn't have a paved road before, you have a paved road now, and it's because China did it. I mean, if you're just a guy that's just working and trying to provide a living for your family, like, I mean, that's a positive note in your book, and you're not going to worry about whatever consequences, because that's not really your problem in a lot of ways. And
I mean,
there's
also,
a lot of things that we could have.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's a lot of stuff that we could have done, and this is kind of like what and we've talked about this a lot in the past, like my kind of geopolitical philosophy, or what I would want to see the U.S. doing, going to areas and working with these different countries and trying to build up the economy locally in those areas. But yeah, just, we're trying to step in where we've neglected or just ignored a lot of issues, and it's helping them gain a lot of influence in parts of the world. And the U.S. we only have ourselves to blame. We can't really fault China for doing this. We can't fault the other countries for cooperating with China. Like, if we wanted to do something about it, we should have done something about it 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, and to go back to the Africa point, I have friends that live in Africa, and one of my friends has told me, like, on one hand, it's good to have, like, somebody come in and help, like, fund all this infrastructure, and it is helping, like, get jobs going, and it is helping businesses develop. But on the other hand, there's a huge concern that the country won't be able to pay back. It won't be able to pay back, like, China, and they will forever be in debt to China. And then the other thing is they're building up all this infrastructure, and then they're building it and moving on to the next thing. And I'm like, which is a problem, because this construction is like, the people there don't have the training to, like, know how to maintain these types of constructions, and like actually, like, keep it maintained and keep it, like, in good condition. And so, like, there's a whole multitude of problems, but I absolutely agree is that the U.S. kind of missed its opportunity in helping the world, instead of going and just bombing other countries and doing other bad shit. To put it blatantly.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way of kind of I guess summarizing both our points. Yeah. And similar thing, I don't remember what country it was actually. It was definitely here in the Caribbean. I want to say Jamaica, but I feel like that's also completely wrong, where China completely renovated a bay and imposed these really tough to meet terms on the country being able to basically gain control of it and being able to pay it off. And so, because they weren't able to pay it off, China now owns that harbor. But I mean, this is just China, really just doing Western style capitalism better. If that's what we want to call it, not better as in good, but just, according to, like, the methods and goals of Western style capitalism, just being better at it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just like, you really summarized it, and I couldn't have said it any better than how you just said, basically. Do you think that, like, China will one day go for Taiwan?
I think it's hard to say. Granted, like, I just don't have the knowledge of what China's doing in that area. I think that, I mean, if it's me, and granted, like, I've never ran much of anything, but like, if it's me and I'm China, like, I would be doing exactly what it's doing and focusing up on establishing relationships in Central, South America, and Africa. And really kind of building up goodwill in these places, and basically, not dissimilar to kind of how the Soviet Union, I mean, it's not exactly the same, but I guess in a sort of Warsaw Pact versus NATO kind of way, NATO still exists, but this is kind of China's own version of the Warsaw Pact, so to speak.
Yeah, no, actually. I mean, I think they could in the future potentially invade. I just think it would have to be in the right conditions. I think they're prepping for the potential possibility at this current moment. Would be my initial assessment.
Yeah.
I don't even know how
my biggest concern.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I was just saying my only concern, if I was China, would be the U.S. And I would think that China's decision on whether or not to invade Taiwan depends on what they expect the U.S. response to be, which is why Biden's been very much like, this has been pretty blatant in stressing the importance of their relationship with Taiwan and our desire to defend Taiwan should China kind of overstep its bounds. But if the U.S. were to collapse, which who knows if or when that would happen, I wouldn't be surprised that if China invaded Taiwan pretty quickly after that. But that's
why I say it depends on the conditions, and I think it would be when the U.S. is in a weaker position. Well, I don't know what that would look like, whether that's economically or in all aspects in terms of a complete collapse. I don't know. And speaking of the complete collapse of the United States, the Oklahoma School Board, I know it's not what you'd expect, Oklahoma, I mean, but I don't know, it's in the very center of the country. Anyways, the Oklahoma School Board approves what would be the taxpayer-funded religious Catholic school in the United States. Talk about the collapse of America. We're bringing the Catholic Church back to the top, like.
Yeah. I mean, this is definitely a problem. It's honestly, like, if you asked me where the first taxpayer-funded public school was going to be at, I might not first guess Oklahoma, but it wouldn't have been that far down the list, to be honest with you.
You mean first taxpayer-funded religious school?
Yeah, sorry, first taxpayer-funded religious school.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, Oklahoma's really, the way Oklahoma's governed, it's not governed that different than Texas. It's not governed that different than Florida. It's heavily Republican controlled. Very few Democratic areas in the state, and they usually get gerrymandered all out. And the only difference from Oklahoma compared to Texas or Florida, there's just no real opportunity in Oklahoma. Anyone who goes to college tends to leave for more money elsewhere. But Oklahoma's been a bit of a political shit show for a while. I know they were one of the first states to really pass some of that anti-trans legislation as well. But speaking on this issue specifically, I think it's a pretty clear violation of the First Amendment. Assuming that this is a school that will be doing religious education, non-secular religious education. We talked a little bit about this before the podcast, because I don't inherently have a problem with, assuming we're allowing charter schools with a Catholic church run charter school, if the only religious education happening in that school is secular, which is my theory, which is kind of how I feel about Catholic hospitals, although I know that's not all the case. But if the taxpayers of Oklahoma are paying for religious indoctrination in schools, and I think that's a pretty clear First Amendment violation. But I don't really have too much hope in the current Supreme Court to actually give a shit about the Constitution.
Yeah, more on that later. I think I don't know. I completely kind of disagree with you on this. I don't think the Catholic Church should be allowed to run any type of school, like whether it's even if they're trying to teach a secular religion. I don't think they're capable of doing that. I just think there's an inherent bias to it, and so that inherent bias automatically like subverts the First Amendment in terms of us having to support that. And I think this is like complete violation of like secular church and state. But this isn't the first time, and this will definitely not be the last time, especially in the last few years with Roe v. Wade and all these other like not getting the COVID vaccine because of religious exemptions and stuff like that. Like I just don't I just think this is like I think this is quite frankly bullshit, because I don't see why a school should like do that. And then what's even more scary to me is the fact that the governor, Kevin Stitt, he signed a bill earlier this year that give parents in the state a tax incentive to send their kids to a private school, including religious schools. And it was like praised by the board or whatever. And I think that's completely unfair to people that actually deserve like, or the people that actually need like tax incentives or that need money back on their taxes. And it like really, it's just another loophole to give rich people more money back, because who's going to send their kids to private school? Rich people. And definitely not like poor people of color. You know, why would they do that? They can't afford to. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, this is also like we're seeing this in a lot of Republican-run states too, and it's something that you see a lot of people support because they're like, oh well, I should have the right to choose what school I go to, which sounds good in theory, except you know how well your child does in school, like the actual school isn't the most important factor. The number one factor when it comes to how well a student does in school is their parents' involvement in their education. You know, both me and you are college graduates. You're still in med school. We both come from households where our parents were very heavily involved in our education. We both graduated from public school. And we would have been successful regardless of what public school we were in because of that reason. But this sort of school choice and allowing public funds be used for private schools is just a way to really just end up shutting down public schools. Because, and this is the thing that people don't talk enough about, is that charter schools, private schools do not have to take everybody. Public schools, unless like it takes a lot to get kicked out of public school, and even then there are usually public funded alternatives for students who the normal system might not be able to handle. But if we end up with an all private, all charter system, you know, your kid has behavior issues, all of a sudden you can't put them in school. Your student is you know, underachieving when it comes to test scores. Well, that makes the school not look as good, and so they'll kick it out, and that happens all the time. I'm trying to remember. I want to say it was no, sorry, I'm thinking of Abbott Elementary actually, but Abbott Elementary actually covered this recently, where there was a charter school looking to purchase the local public school, and one of the parents spoke up about it because her student had been kicked out of the charter school because his grades weren't at where this charter school wanted to be, and that's not. Well, that's a television show. That's something that happens every day in real life. And I mean, that's the great thing about, you know, government funded programs, is that they're for everyone. Anyone can take advantage of them, and that's why we need to protect them.
Yeah, and then I mean, it's robbing like kids of a chance to be educated and like go to school and develop those social connections, and not even all the social part, really just getting educated. And if they keep poor people from getting educated, they're less likely to like stand up for what they believe in. And that's kind of what they're trying to do, just from a very like long game perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, the end result of this is just a way to funnel public money into the hands of the people who donate to the politicians. Betsy DeVos was a huge proponent of charter schools. Would also often neglect to mention that. Would also neglect to mention that she was a big investor in charter schools as well, as to the benefit from that shift from public to charter. But that's usually what the goal is. It's just another way for rich people to get richer at the expense of all of us.
Yep. Speaking of a poor, uneducated man, Donald Trump has recently been unindicted. Sorry, not poor, uneducated man, poor, uneducated child. Donald Trump has recently been indicted again. And how many counts?
Again, yeah.
Tell me what you know about this, because I'm kind of up to date, but also not as up to date as you are probably.
Sure. So, so Trump was indicted. This goes back to the documents thing in the beginning of the year, where Trump has taken a whole bunch of it's stolen a whole bunch of documents from from when he left the White House, and I try to remember the actual organization that is it'll come to me here in a second, but it's but basically the government said, hey, we have some missing documents. We think you have them. Can you turn them in? And he said, no. Pretty please. No. Pretty please. All right, well, here they are. But then he kept some. So that's kind of where it all comes from. And so there's going to be a lot of people that are going to try to compare this with Joe Biden, because Joe Biden also had a similar issue where he had documents from his time as vice president at his residence. But the biggest difference between the two of them is when asked to return it, Joe Biden said yes and didn't make a big deal about it. And Donald Trump tried to keep them. And I think there's some evidence that he might have even tried to use them to enrich himself as well.
I mean, you need to pay off that debt that he's got. I mean, my boyfriend and I call it his business strategy debt maxing, and Donald Trump is great at debt maxing. But I think it's funny to see that all this stuff has happened, but he still has all these supporters that are like, yes, Donald Trump 2024. I'm like, are you sure about that? This is what you want? We've never had and not to say our presidents don't commit crimes. I just mean we've never had a president commit as many crimes so blatantly and everything is completely fine.
Yeah. I mean, I say this episode about me going through Rule for it all, every week. But yeah, I don't think this is going to harm Trump. This has been a long time coming. And so it wasn't surprised. Trump told us the day before that he was going to be indicted, and he's been setting up the whole, oh, this is a witch hunt, they're trying to come after me. He started blaming this on woke justices or some bullshit like that too. But I don't think this is going to hurt Trump, at least in the Republican primary. It's certainly not going to help Trump, especially since Ron DeSantis is such a black hole of charisma. But when I go out in rural Florida, I do see DeSantis stuff, but I see way more Trump stuff than I see DeSantis stuff. It's not even close.
I mean, and DeSantis' poll numbers are going down, aren't they? I mean, I think that's what we said earlier when we were looking at them. They're going down nationally, and they're probably going down in Florida as well. We described him earlier, before we started this podcast, we've described Ron DeScrantimonious DeSantis, as Donald Trump likes to say.
He actually likes to call him Rob.
What does he like to call him?
Oh, he calls him Rob all the time on Truth Social.
Rob?
Yes. I don't know if it's on purpose, but I think it has to be. Instead of Ron, he'll put Rob.
That's a power play on Donald Trump's move. But but either way, we said that Ron Dictator DeSantis was losing polling numbers, and we're not even close to the start of this election at all. So for him to already be losing track to run on is kind of, it doesn't look very good for him, especially since we initially called him the moderate Republican. That's kind of what he was initially. Like that's how he marketed himself as, right?
Um, when he was first running for governor. I mean, there's a lot of different steps to Ron DeSantis. So when Ron DeSantis was running for his House seat, that was one video of him reading The Art of the Deal to his at the time infant child, and using like I guess little playing blocks, I don't know what to call them, to build a wall. And then when he ran for governor the first time, he kind of was like, I'm the moderate Republican, I might be Republican, but I actually care about the environment. Please ignore all the environmental disasters that are about to happen underneath my administration. And he kind of started becoming, he started seeing a little bit of the fascist in Ron DeSantis towards the end of that term, especially when it came to dissent, getting rid of Andrew Warren, the DA in Hillsborough County, for basically saying that he wasn't going to enforce DeSantis's what was it? It was his it's one of his anti-LGBT or anti-critical race theory laws. I forget which. And actually, the Florida court said that he wasn't allowed to remove him, but said they lacked the ability to force DeSantis to actually keep the guy in power. But we started seeing a little bit of those fascist tendencies before in the time leading up to his reelection, and ever since he's won reelection, he's just really dived feet first, head first, whatever you want to say, into the anti-woke bullshit craziness, and really ignoring a lot of serious problems in Florida. And it's starting to, people are like, especially since he's now like, the presidential cycle's kind of started, mainstream media is really kind of uncovering a lot of the shit that, if you were paying attention in Florida, you already knew about, but now it's starting to get a wider or bigger megaphone, so to speak. And so people become more aware about it, more educated about it. They're actually getting to know the guy beyond, outside of his controlled bubble. And it turns out that Ron or Rob is kind of a douche, and he sucks at his job.
Well, also, like, he, not even 2 weeks ago, he passed a bill in Florida that prevented like any illegal immigrants from working. I don't know if it was 2 weeks ago. It was in the last month or so, maybe like a little bit longer ago. But it went into effect, and there's already farms on Florida that have rotting fruit because white people don't want to do those things, or not even white people. People that are legal immigrants don't want to do that. You know what I mean? It's like they don't want to do that job, and like now I think Florida's economy is going to suffer severely, and that's going to be another downturn for Ron DeSantis, Ron or Rob or whatever the hell his name is.
Yeah, like there was actually something this week about a couple of Florida congressmen basically having to play, I don't know if you want to call it defense for him, because the farmers who campaigned for him, who voted for him, it's a good case of the snake biting its own tail, but being very upset about the negative impact of these policies. And honestly, the policies were crazier beyond just, hey, you can't hire illegal immigrants, which regardless of how I feel about it, I understand it. But it even included stuff like, hey, if you are transporting an illegal immigrant, that is a crime. So you could pick someone off the side of the road and that's hitchhiking and say, yeah, I'll drive you up to Walmart, no big deal. And if that person turned out to be an illegal immigrant, you could be arrested.
It could be as simple as your friend, and you get pulled over by the cops, and your friend, you didn't even know that your friend was an illegal immigrant. They'd kind of get fucked in that situation. But it's going to be fun to see the downfall of DeSantis, and what's weird is like I've seen clips of him and he literally has no personality. Like he might be a bot.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's clear that like he's just not ready. Well, it's not even that he's not ready. It's just he's not equipped for a national stage where, people aren't. He's not in a position to basically create a friendly environment for himself. Here in Florida, Republican Party in Florida has done a really good job as far as consolidating power, and basically there's very few Democrats in the state legislature in Florida anymore. Um, you know, it's just Republicans the whole way up outside of a couple areas. And then most of the areas that would have Democrats, they've basically gerrymandered them. So that way they have no Democrats, or they have fewer than they previously did. Try to remember, there's one Democrat.
I gotta cut you off because we got less than a minute left in this Zoom call. So we'll be right back, folks.
Well, yeah.
And we back.
What's up? Oh God, this is starting to get to me, this sleep, but I will promise to soldier on. Much like the it's like just me continuing is just as big of a sacrifice as, just name whatever battle you want to name. I was thinking about the soldiers of Iwo Jima, just instead of planting a flag, it's me planting my head on a pillow.
I was thinking the Napoleonic Wars, but that's because I'm on succession bend.
Fair enough. It is pretty Shakespearean. I think it's based off, not based off, but really influenced by not King Lear. I don't know, one of them. The one that's about Richard III, I think, is that one. Macbeth.
Macbeth.
It's about.
All right. Well.
Shakespeare. It's based off something.
I think it's, anyways. Going back to Descrantimonious DeSantis and woke and Donald Trump, we have this hilarious clip of Donald Trump, being Donald Trump. So let's take a rip, as the Beybladers used to say. Let her rip.
That's also what I say when my stomach starts rumbling.
Oh my.
And I don't like the term woke because I hear woke. It's like just a term that half the people can't even define it. They don't know what it is. A lot of things going on with our military, with the woke and all this nonsense. They're not learning to fight and protect us from some very bad people. They want to go woke.
So we can go ahead and pause it. So Trump has kind of flip-flopped on his whole wokeness binge, especially since DeSantis has kind of turned himself into the anti-woke crusader, world's shittiest superhero. But I if I didn't know Trump as well as I do, and I feel like I know Trump just as well as just about anybody, I would say that he saw the light and realized that all the woke shit is bullshit. Or maybe he realizes it's bullshit, but he actually, I changed my mind. Donald Trump knows the woke shit is bullshit. He just doesn't care. That is where I'm settling on it. But he kind of revealed his true colors there in that first clip, where he said, yeah, no one can define it, because there's been so many people. And I think we talked about one of these people on an earlier episode where they were asked, hey, can you define woke? And they couldn't, because woke just means this is what I'm mad about right at this exact moment. Black people getting a little uppity, that sounds pretty woke to me. Target has LGBTQ display during Pride Month, bit woke to me. Walmart is out of the, doesn't have 2 liters of Pepsi. God damn it, even Walmart's gone woke. And I mean, that's literally how it's used. It's not that the word woke doesn't have an actual meaning, but the anti-woke people don't have an idea what that actual meaning is, and it just means whatever I'm mad about right now.
No, absolutely. That's exactly it. And I think they all know that this whole woke business is bullshit. Like they're just using this once again to sidetrack us instead of focusing on what actually matters. And like Santos knows it, Donald Trump knows it. Like it's a well-known fact, I think, but I think it's being used on purpose. It's
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I mean, no, sorry. Finish what you're saying.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say it's kind of like, I mean, like, what else are the Republicans can't run on? Hey, we're gonna cut taxes for rich people because like no one's gonna vote for them if they actually share what their actual goal is. Anything else they have is basically unpopular. You know, we're gonna kick tens of millions of people off of food stamps. No one's gonna. Well, some people are, but those people are crazy. But most people are gonna be running around saying, "Yeah, kick those poor people off of food stamps. They should have known better than to be poor." You know, and so like all they have left is, especially after Roe v. Wade, they literally just have like boogeymen left. And you know, we saw this in the midterms where it was literally, you know, trans shit, critical race theory, and it didn't work. You know, the Democrats had one of the best years for incumbent president in the midterms ever, and they kept the Senate too. But that's all. That's literally all they have. That's all they have. And so they're just gonna double down. They're just doubling down on something that didn't work. And while DeSantis had some success with it in 2020, a bit of an outlier when you look across the country. But as we talked about his polling numbers earlier, like it doesn't hold up when people have actual issues that they're worried about, and you're just going on about the woke and the leftists and all this bullshit. But I need to put food on my kids' table.
Yeah, exactly. And like I think it's I mean that's not all that the Republicans have. They also have the Supreme Court in the bag. That's kind of all they have is the woke and the Supreme Court.
Well, I mean, and the thing is, they can't even use the Supreme Court because that's what they used in 2016 to get Trump. They kind of try to get Trump elected, but I mean, they've got a 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court. Like, and you know, like the next person who retires will probably either be Clarence or Roberts, and both of them seem like they're pretty much going to hold on to that power as long as they can. Like, I just don't see him retiring anytime soon. Like it just doesn't seem like it will be an issue, at least, you know, probably. I can't imagine it's gonna be an issue in 2 years, let alone maybe in 6, but I can't see it being an issue in the next 2 years. So yeah.
No, absolutely, I agree. And speaking of the Supreme Court backed employers in a suit over like strike losses, and so basically, I know this is kind of important to you, Marcel, is federal law did not protect a union from potential liabilities for damage that arose during a strike, and that a state court should resolve questions of liability. And I think that's, in some ways, it kind of makes sense. In other ways, it doesn't. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So to give a better picture of what happened, basically before a bunch of concrete plant workers went on strike, they started the truck, started mixing cement, and then said, all right, cool, we're going on strike, and left the truck running. And the company claimed that because there is, I guess, an expiration date on wet cement, or expiration time on wet cement, you can't just leave it mixing and it still be usable. They suffered financial losses as a result of this, and they sued the union. Supreme Court sided with business because they always do, and while I understand it, and I don't necessarily disagree with the logic behind it, fuck them. That's kind of how I feel about it. You know, it doesn't like no matter what, like workers in business are always going to be on polar opposite sides when it comes to goals. Workers want to get paid more, businesses want to pay less. Workers would like better safety protections, so that way they don't lose an arm. Business says, well, how can I cut a corner? Maybe I don't need to put that railing in front of that giant boiling furnace of molten metal to try to keep people from falling into it. So, what benefits the workers is almost always in opposition to what might benefit the business. And, when it comes to that kind of stuff, we saw Gorsuch a few years, not this has been a minute, but when he ruled against the fire worker who left his stalled vehicle in snow that was that's in order to preserve his own life, so we never see them ever actually, when it comes to these kind of side on the case of the worker, but all suddenly now it's side on the business. No, fuck the business. They'll screw over the workers every day, anytime. I don't give a shit about them. And I'm always pro worker. Doesn't matter what it is.
I think the other thing to think about is like in a situation where like employees want to go on strike, but now they're going to be potentially held liable for the impacts of that strike. Like, I think it shifts the power of balance into the employer's favor instead, because now employees are less likely to go on strike or demand more pay or like something else because they're going to be terrified that they're going to be held liable for something. When
I think that's
yeah.
No, sorry, finish what you're saying. I was just gonna
say, like, I think that I honestly forgot my train of thought. Never mind. Go ahead.
You're fine. But yeah, like I think that is part of it as well. I mean, well, let's just say that is part of the fear too, is that maybe that like what counts as like where does this line get drawn? Like if I work at a grocery store and I go on strike and there's not enough workers to sell, I don't know, fucking oranges, and the oranges spoil, is the union responsible for the spoilage of those oranges? So it is like, all right, where does this line get drawn when it comes to like how does a strike impact the profits of a business? Now, if it's a case of where workers can't set things up in a way before they go on strike to add to the increased cost of striking to the business, I get it. But if it's just any sort of situation in which a strike that cost the employer money, opens up the workers to a loss, then yeah, that's just another in a long list of government siding for business at the expense of labor. And yeah, it potentially opens up unions to be liable for all sorts of bullshit that they shouldn't have to be liable for, because it's a right for it's an inherent human right to demand fair compensation for your labor, and you shouldn't have to suffer because of that.
I mean, I think it's also anti-union too, because if it's not the workers that are going to be held liable, then it's going to be the union, and so workers are going to be less likely to unionize because the benefits of unionization will be lower, quite literally. So it further shifts that balance, I guess. That's all I'm trying to say.
No, yeah, I agree. And like, well, that too, and it's like all of a sudden, it's like a cascading effect that could really hamper a union, because especially if it's a smaller union, doesn't have a lot of members, it might not have that much money on hand. It's not like every union's just this giant cash funnel, and so all of a sudden, you might get away with charging your workers $15 a paycheck for their dues, but if you're liable for product spoilage or whatever, union dues have to go up to compensate for that. And now the union seems like a less attractive an option to the workers. And that can really hamper union membership, especially in certain states where they're already putting in a lot of requirements to try to do that. I know that there's a certain percentage of workers that have to vote in order to unionize. And so it wouldn't increased dues could, really hamper having that percentage.
Yeah. I mean, it just kind of shows the level of corruption that the highest court in the land actually has. And it's kind of scary because if the highest court in the land has this level of corruption, then just imagine how bad it is at like a lower level. And
oh yeah. No, I mean, there's very few things as American as corrupt government officials. And people believe that the corruption is usually anti-business when it's the exact opposite. It's in favor of money and interest 99% of the time.
Yeah. On a more positive note, something the Supreme Court did do correctly, I know I was just shitting on them, but they also can do things right, is they basically struck down a Republican drawn gerrymandered the fuck map or district in Alabama. And like the map essentially discriminated against African American voters, and wouldn't it combine the two biggest cities like that Alabama has into one?
Yeah, so I mean, this has been a map for Alabama. Like, this isn't, so it's a little bit more complicated than that. So basically, Alabama has seven congressional districts, and a lower court said they needed to make a second. Two federal courts, but lower than the Supreme Court said that Alabama need to add a second majority black district because as it's currently drawn, they have one majority black district that includes Birmingham and Montgomery. And then the other 7 districts are all Republican-run white majority districts. So all they really have to do is basically give Birmingham and Montgomery their own district. And so Supreme Court decided to take up the case because Alabama, being Alabama, said, well, how dare y'all come after our racist as fuck gerrymandered maps? And rare win by the Supreme Court. I don't know how cynical this win is, but I'll take it. Basically rule that Alabama, you need to listen to the lower court and draw another district. So might be gaining an extra Democratic representative out of Alabama, which I'll take. I mean, I'll take, and I'll also take the precedent this hopefully sets as far as how states can draw their districts, because there's a lot of states, like Alabama is certainly not the only state like this. Florida recently, basically drew their districts to where like Tallahassee, which is a majority Democratic area, no longer has a Democratic representative because of the way that the maps were redrawn. Actually, this happened all up and down Florida, but this happens everywhere. There's a very famous district. I don't remember what state it's in, but it's basically just a giant thin line going across the state. Increase voting power of the majority party in that state. And I mean, everyone knows how fucked up gerrymandering is, and honestly shouldn't exist. These congressional districts probably should be drawn by some non-partisan committee. If AI could be trusted to draw districts, that might even be a possible option in the future. But certainly, hopefully this will set a precedent for future Supreme Court rulings, because this won't be the last ruling when it comes to fucked up districts, hitting the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's it shows you just like, I guess it's just classic tactics by Republicans of like, well, we're gonna say they're gonna be told to do one thing and they're gonna just not comply and expect not to get caught, and then they're gonna be upset when they do get caught, like when they tried to overthrow the government back in 2020, and just like, or Donald Trump and his indictment, and so just kind of stuff like that. And I think it's just like another version of that happening at a state level. Thankfully it was caught this time, and they're gonna have to fix their mistake.
Yeah. And it's that I will say, I'm one of those anti it's both sides kind of people. Like, it's rarely both sides, but when it comes to gerrymandering, it is very much a both sides issue, because New York has gerrymandered all the hell as well in favor of Democrats. Like, we really just need to get rid of, like, politicians should not be able to choose your voters. Like, the whole purpose of democracy.
It rigs it. It literally, they can basically rig it to whichever way they want it to go, whether that's the blue side or the red side. And I think it should just be based off what the people want, whether that's blue or red. Okay, that's what the people wanted,
Yeah, and like, districts should be drawn as close to being a perfect square as possible, and it should never like cut communities in half. Ideally, it shouldn't ever cut counties in half, but it certainly shouldn't ever cut entire cities in half either. Like, I shouldn't have to have a different congressional representative than my neighbor who lives down the street. But, I don't see gerrymandering being outlawed anytime soon. Fingers crossed that it does happen, because I don't think that we can ever call ourselves a true democracy when, our politicians are the one that decide whether or not they have a seat and not the actual voters.
Yeah, no, absolutely. On an entertaining note, we have a Fox News post essentially saying that she got kicked out of a restaurant because she was praying, but, well, she wasn't. This is a fake story.
We know who we are, and we know whose we are. For those of us who believe, we must be bold in our faith right now.
Oh, pause it. Incidentally, I want you to...
Does it keep going?
Sorry. You might want to see how they play more of it after they talk. You might just want to skip past it. I'm sorry, I couldn't find a clip that was just her.
Whose we are. For those of us who believe, we must be bold in our faith right now. When you gather in public spaces, pray thankfully over your food. Even when the server gives you the stink eye or tells the manager that your peaceful grace is triggering them. Had it happen to me. I've been asked to leave a restaurant for openly bowing my head in prayer hands.
Why?
In America. It's all good. They don't deserve my money anyway.
Girl, they weren't going to take your money. Girl, just stop. Just no. You were not kicked out. You need to stop. That's just fucking bullshit.
Yeah. In America, a country, depending on what poll you look at, anywhere from 63 to 70% Christian. I think it's probably 63. But like, yeah, there's no way in hell that story is real. This is like the same shit. Like, what's up with conservatives just telling like obvious like bullshit stories like that? Anyone, if you even think about it for a second, like, this is the new litter box. But like, if she actually did get kicked out of a restaurant, it was probably because she was being a Karen in there and bitching about her ice water not being sufficiently cold enough. I don't have enough ice cubes in my ice water. I demand that every one of my cups of ice water have exactly 7 cubes of ice. 6 cubes makes it too warm. 8 cubes is too cold. All right, I've done the math on this. All right, not the liberal communist Marx math. This is actual math. All right, and this isn't in that transgender math. I've done the math on the ice. But yeah, like, there's literally never been a case. I mean, I haven't researched it, but I will pay someone. They can find me an actual documented case of someone being kicked out of a restaurant in America because they were praying to themselves. All right.
In the last 10 years. Anything before, yeah. I don't know.
I just have a hard time believing.
I can't even imagine, like, why would they do that? Like, this doesn't benefit them. Restaurants don't like kicking people out. It's bad for business and it's bad for the customer. It doesn't look good. So why the fuck would
Yeah.
they kick him out? And then on top of that, like of all people, somebody who is like a news commentator, that's like somebody kind of important, you know, and like somebody who might have like a lot of power. And so why would they do that? Complete horseshit. And you can tell.
Yeah, like bow your head, silent prayer. I doubt that. And like if the server, like have you ever worked in customer service, Sam?
Yeah.
Yeah, you hate all customers. It didn't matter that one was a Christian or not. You just hated them all equally. But yeah. So like, if the server was giving you your stink eye, it's literally just because you were there. It had nothing to do with you praying or anything like that. You know, I've eaten in restaurants. You've eaten in restaurants. People bow their heads and pray as a family every single day in restaurants, and nothing happens. This is just Christian persecution complex at its finest. You know, our savior was nailed to a cross. You know, and he was persecuted. So damn it, I need to be persecuted too, despite the fact that I have a government that is disproportionately the same religion as me, that constantly forces other people to live under the same religious teachings that I believe they should have to live under. Damn it. I gotta find some persecution. Why can't I be persecuted? Damn it. When is the time for the...
I was gonna say, if they really wanted to get persecuted, they should switch religions to being Muslim and try praying in a restaurant as a Muslim would. And then maybe something would actually happen.
Or hey, just try to build a mosque in New York City. You know, just try to do that. Or hey, just exist. You know. But yeah, like, you know, as much as like conservatives give liberals shit about cancel culture and like wokeness and all this stuff, like they are the biggest like snowflakes in America is the conservative Christian. Everyone's out to get them. Nothing's their fault. And, you know, there's persecution around the corner. Damn it. So there's a rainbow flag that's infringing on my freedom.
It is 4 houses down, and I can just feel it waving every time it goes in the direction of my house. I feel it. I feel the devil getting closer and closer.
The goddamn devil with his trying to they're trying to turn the frogs gay. Trying to turn the frogs gay and turn our boys and the girls and the boys, you know, and defile our good Christian children. Let me tell you something, Sham. I ain't gonna let no trans person molest one of my kids. That's the priest's job. That's the job. That's the priest's job.
And on that note, thanks for joining us for episode 6. We'll hopefully let the priest edit this video.
Yeah. Well, we don't want him to get his hands anywhere that he might get caught, you know.
That's why his hands stay on top of the computer editing and away from children.
No, there you go, Sham. Should have realized that. Always got a plan for everything.
Exactly. Thank you again. Bye.